Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Online Warriors podcast. It is Wednesday, 11/11. So first of all, happy Veterans Day. Thanks to all who have served. For the listeners in America, and actually for the listeners outside of America, November 11th is Veterans Day. We have a special episode today. I'm, of course, Illeagle 86, and I'm joined, as always, by Nerdbomber and Techtic. Say what's up, y'all.
What's up?
Hi.
Oh, that's a throwback. Was that Bud Light or Budweiser, one of the two?
I think so. I don't know. I know it was like a frog said it.
That was just the fringe of like when I was old enough to remember commercials, so you dug deep for that one. We have a great episode today. Not only do we have a usual slate of news topics, we're going to be talking about Star Wars, particularly Darth Maul. We're going to, of course, be talking a little bit about Alex Trebek, as sad as that is. And the Mass Effect remaster news, which Nerdbomber is going to go absolutely crazy about later in the episode. So we have those topics, but we also have a very special interview today with actress Amy Rutledge from Rent-A-Pel. So we're actually going to start off with that, and we're going to introduce Amy to the show right now. So take a listen and enjoy. So Amy, thank you so much for coming on the show. I guess to start at the top, before we get into Rent-A-Pel and stuff, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, basically how you got started in the industry, what inspired you to pursue a career in acting, which, by the way, makes me personally jealous and probably a lot of our listeners personally jealous.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. Like, I'm really grateful and just really honored to be on here and talking with you guys today. So thank you so much. I actually had the sense that I wanted to be in the industry when I was really young. And I feel in a way that I'm really lucky because at the age of 3 years old, like not even exaggerating, I knew that I wanted to be a part of the magic that was when I watched films and TV. And so my grandmother was a really amazing pianist and musician. And so she would always have on like musicals. And I specifically remember watching The Sound of Music. And I was 3, and just standing up on my chair, we would watch it around the dinner table and just like belting out the songs. And then when I was alone, I would go down and line up all my stuffed animals and like all my toys and like sing and perform for them. And it's kind of actually amazing because it was this seed was planted pretty early on. And I had no one in my family or in my life that, wanted to be an actor or was in this business. So it really just kind of came to me, and it's something that I always want to do. But when I grew up in a very small Northwest New Jersey town, and really the main focus was on sports. So I grew up, doing cheerleading and gymnastics and like horseback riding, and sports was really valued in my community. And there really wasn't any resources for acting or that kind of world. So my mom would bring me every once in a while to New York City when she could for acting classes growing up, and then, some summer camps and stuff like that. But I really didn't get my start until I was a little older. I was 19 or 20, and I booked my first feature film, an indie film, with no experience. So I'm really grateful for that. I kind of see that as my big break because, to get a lead in an indie film without any experience whatsoever was really massive. I'll always be grateful for that. And then it kind of just took off from there, and getting referred by people I was working with, and, I would join forces with a group of friends, and we would do plays, and then we would make movies out of the plays, and doing the whole film festival circuit. And yeah, so I've been acting really on and off for the last, 14 years. And here we are now with Rent-A-Pel. It's just really a lucky break.
So that's kind of a really good segue to the fact that a decent amount of the films you've been in have been kind of the horror/thriller genre. So what specifically with that actually draws you to that genre, or was it more of a coincidence?
I always grew up watching horror films, and I love them. And I love the thrill. I love the scare factor. I liked, it kind of like when you're riding a roller coaster, like that thrill of like that fear that is not real, but it's exciting in a way. And I think my dad had me watching Jaws when I was like 6 years old. I think like I watched so many horrible horror films growing up, and then I'm kind of like a little traumatized now about it. But I actually haven't done more horror films than any other genre, really. It's just the horror films that I've been in were the ones that had just distribution deals. But they kind of just came to me, and I took them, of course, and I actually had not wanted to do horror anymore just because I was dealing with my own mental health. And now that I'm older, I'm kind of like a wuss. Like, I can't watch horror films anymore. It's just really this weird switch happened as I got older where, like, I'm having, like, horrific nightmares, and, like, the images that I see are, like, burned into my brain, like, for the rest of my life. And so I was like, I need to just take a step away and just not do horror anymore. And, like, I swear it was, like, the week later that I got offered to read the script for Rent-A-Pal, and I didn't realize what genre it was up front. And then I read it till the, one part, and I was like, oh my God. It took a quick dark turn, and I was like, oh man, I'm like, I have to go back on my word. Like, I know I said that I wasn't going to do this anymore, but this is an amazing script, and the people that I was, interacting with, John and everyone, they were just so amazing, and I'm like, this is something really special, so I have to take it.
So kind of segueing into, how horror movies can really kind of impact your mental health, not just watching them. Obviously, there's a lot of things that you might see and that kind of make you anxious, but especially when you're filming, I feel like that's got to be pretty mentally taxing, and especially when you're getting so immersed in the character and the world when you're creating them. So how do you get in the right headspace both before and after filming when you're shooting a horror movie like Rent-A-Pal?
So for this one, it wasn't, like, I have to say on set, it was a very joyful experience, which I think people always find a little surprising. Like, not once did I feel like we're, kind of lingering in this dark, uncomfortable space throughout filming. Like, it was very, like, there was a lot of jokes, there was a lot of love. The whole thing was just really magical. And so for me and my character, maybe just towards the end where things get into it, like, I was a little nervous, but I wasn't, like, it wasn't anything that I hadn't done before, so for me it was kind of fine. I think if I were playing David's role, that would have been a completely whole different ball game, like getting into that space where he needs to be. But in the past where I've done very dark, I have done a lot like really dark, creepy, weird stuff, and I've dealt with filming where I know there was someone that has, or my character played someone with a mental illness, and back when I was younger, I would really settle into that space and kind of like really live it. And I saw where that was just so unhealthy for me. Dealing with my own mental illness, just kind of really pulling from my own life and my own life experiences. And that really worked for me because I got to a state of, hysteria or a state of, emotion that maybe I wouldn't have if I hadn't gone through the things that I've been through in my life. But I realized that I didn't have to live in that space all the time. And so I know there's like a lot of method actors that really bring their character to life all throughout their daily life, even when they're not even filming. And for me, that's just not healthy. So I really started getting into meditation and really more holistic ways to sort of just clear my mind and sort of just connect to my soul, really. And really some magical things have come out of that for me. So that's how I prepare now. I really just take care of myself. I do what I need to do to feel good. It's, whether it's like eating healthy and getting good sleep and really just meditating.
Right. So, well, in a year like this one, obviously all those things are critically important, whether or not you're, in a movie like Rent-A-Pal. But I do, it's the elephant in the room. We should talk about Rent-A-Pal came out in September. And granted, I don't know exactly what the production schedule was like, whether you were filming this year or whether you were just, working towards the release. But given how different the world looks this year, how did COVID impact or change the release of the movie in terms of scheduling or other difficulties?
Yeah, as far as scheduling, I'm not quite sure about that. I know they were saying they were going to do it in the fall and that they were hoping to have a theatrical release. And I was really nervous because I was really excited for that, obviously, to have a whole regional release and
right.
theaters. And so for me, that was like so exciting. But then, it was kind of sad because the theaters weren't open. But miraculously enough, about 2 weeks before the film was supposed to be released, they started opening up the theaters. Right. And so I was like, oh my God, like this was so meant. There was a lot of times, by the way, like even before I auditioned throughout the entire filming process and till where we are right now to this day, there were so many synchronicities and so many things that had opened up that were just unbelievable and so just like truly magical. So I really do believe that, it was meant to be released at this time. However, there's some things we did get to miss out on, like a premiere and, doing like the whole red carpet thing and, kind of celebrating with a cast and crew. They're all out in Denver and I'm in Jersey. So, I mean, we did get to see each other and celebrate through Zoom, but, it's not the same. But I think the content and the themes in the film really just were so relatable, even more so now, especially with what we've all been through this entire year. But I think like it was just a perfect timing, I think. And people really resonated with the loneliness and the themes of, mental illness and like really taking care of yourself. And so, yeah.
So in the movie Rent-A-Pal, you play the main character's love interest, Lisa. She's a really nurturing character, very empathetic, and a natural caregiver. You had mentioned that you've gotten into meditation a lot with regards to holistic health. With that, did that help you to connect to the character, or was there additional special prep that was done to make that connection, or is that just kind of how you are naturally as a person?
I would like to say that I am already like Lisa in a lot of ways. I care a lot about other human beings. I'm very empathetic. Sometimes it's wonderful. Sometimes that's not so great. Because I feel like I really feel when other people are suffering, it really affects me. But I really related and had so much compassion from the moment I read the script, even before I auditioned. And I was like, oh my God, this is such a character I can relate to. She's so kind and caring, and there's a lot of me in that as well. And so I was just instantly drawn to her. And I just fell in love with her right away. And I think it's really important to have compassion for the characters that you are playing. And there were some things that I had to do that I thought were necessary for me to really kind of live in the space of Lisa. Like, she was a caretaker, and and I teach meditation. So like I do I do care for people in that way where I help them relieve their own suffering. But she worked with senior citizens on the weekends. She volunteered, and that's not something that I had ever done. So I signed up for New York Cares is a really wonderful program where you can just volunteer for literally they have so many things that you can volunteer and pick from. And so I chose to work with a senior and help her with her technology. So I helped her with her phone and with her laptop, and, helping her with Gmail and how to like send emails. And it was just so rewarding and beautiful. And so it was such a fulfilling experience, and it brought me so much joy in my real life. But then I was able to really, the lines that I speak in my opening monologue is real. Like, everything I was saying, I was real. For me, it was so truthful and authentic because, I actually was thinking about this woman that I had helped and how she was so grateful, and just that experience that it really made that come alive for me.
That's kind of awesome too, because not only then are you obviously helping to better fill that role when you're acting, but that's always going to be something now that you've gotten to take away with like your personal everyday life from this character of Lisa that will always be with you. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I gotta ask, there's a really, really fun scene where you guys are at a roller rink on a date. Did you already know how to skate, or did you have to learn for the role?
I thought I knew. That was like the cool thing to do. I don't know about you guys, but like growing up in a small town, like literally the only thing we had with this roller rink. Literally, like to get to a mall or a movie theater, you'd have to drive like 30 minutes away. So down the street, every Friday night in 6th grade, we roller skated, and that was always really good. And so I was like, yeah, maybe I should take a lesson before we film, or I was like, nah, I think I'm good. Like, it's just roller skating. It's probably like getting on a bike. And so when we got up, we got the skates on while we were filming, and I got up. And I was like really wobbly, and I was like, oh my God, like this is not what I remember at all. Like, I don't know if I can do this actually. And so I was like kind of hobbling along, and they were like filming. Oh no, we were rehearsing actually, sorry. And they were like, Amy, no, like you're the good skater. Like you have to be the one. And I was like, no, like I'm not acting. Like, I'm so sorry. And but then like as soon as we kind of got it going, then it was kind of like I was fine, and like really hurt my knees and like my ankles though, so I was kind of like, oh, my age is really showing.
I feel like I have that experience every winter when I try to go ice skating for the first time again.
Yeah, it's like your ankles like are all like knocking and weird, and it just like hurts. I totally understand.
That's awesome. So Rent-A-Pal takes a really interesting look at the relationships we form and the media we consume. What key takeaway do you hope the viewers get from this movie with respect to that?
Oh man, just like connection is just so important, and just really putting away the social media. And I actually just watched this Social Dilemma. I don't know if you guys saw that documentary.
I've heard about it. I'm afraid to watch it.
You have to watch it. It's so good, and it really just ties into like kind of that whole theme of just being obsessed and just addicted truly to, social media and how you lose out on that human connection. And it's just so sad. It's just like, it's really heartbreaking. Every time I watch this film, I cry. Just because I think we can all relate to that too. And so I just hope it kind of is a really eye-opener to like, oh, wow, like I could see myself going down that path. Hopefully for a lot of us, not that far as extreme as David goes, but just really nurturing and valuing just human connection. It's just so important. It's really crucial to our survival, actually. And it's kind of scary the way, even myself, I'm like, I'm addicted. I had to like really realize after watching The Social Dilemma, like I'm addicted to my social media and my phone. And like, I know better. Like I teach people this. I teach people to not wake up and go right to your phones. But like some days I do that. And so it's a real eye opener. And I think hopefully people will see that and kind of be able to take a step back and be like, whoa, like I see where this is going.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm a self-professed kind of a movie nerd. So a lot of my questions are very production based. But I want to talk about, so it's a small cast with this movie. Most of the film's time is actually spent, focusing on the main character's interaction with his mother and then a VHS tape, which kind of, I guess, gives color to some of the things you were just talking about as well for the listeners who haven't seen the movie. But I guess my question is, did that make for a more tight-knit set relative to what you've experienced elsewhere? And also, did you actually get to work directly with Wil Wheaton at any point?
I know, like, everyone gets a little disappointed when I tell them that I didn't get to meet him even. I haven't even talked to him. And it's just kind of funny, you're in a film with someone and then you don't, you haven't even met them. So I hopefully one day we'll get to, say hi at least. But yeah, he did his scenes all in chunks, the production.
Right.
And actually Brian Landis Folkens, who plays David, was actually doing a play. He was a lead in this play. So they had to take some time off filming so that he can, finish out his play. And so the first part I came out and I filmed for the first week. And then I actually got altitude sickness, which I didn't even know was a thing. And then
it's a thing.
Yeah.
I've experienced this as well. Yeah, I spent some time in New Mexico at one point up in the mountains there, and it's brutal. So I feel for you.
Yeah, and like I was dehydrated. Like I felt like my eyeballs were like gonna fall out. They were so dry, and like I was so dehydrated. And towards the end, we were filming the scene where we're in the car and we're looking for Lucille, and it's very like high energy, and we were like whipping the car around, and I was like, oh my god, like, and John, the director, kept being like, come on, keep the energy up, and I was like, I didn't want to like stop, but I was like, God, like I feel terrible, like I feel like I might faint actually, and we got out and like I felt like really woozy and I was kind of wobbling and then I actually collapsed, and luckily I think two of the guys in the crew like grabbed me in time. But the next day we were supposed to do the ending scene and they were like, we can't have you do this. So I actually came back again in like a month later where I did my scenes, and like in between that Wil Wheaton came and did his he was only filming on a soundstage. So he was just there for literally like a morning and then he like flew out. But yeah, like our entire, I've actually had really great experiences on every single set that I've worked on, which I feel like I'm really lucky. And I actually like really look for that. And I really value, kind of like a family relationship on set. And I've only worked with really great, beautiful, kind human beings. And this filming was no exception. Everyone was just so loving. And I don't know if it's because like everyone's from Denver and like just the people out there. I was just like, when I had to leave, I actually cried because I'm like, I don't want to leave here. Like everyone's so nice and kind and caring. And it was just, it's just like a big difference from living here in Jersey City to, the quality of life out there and the kindness and graciousness of literally every single person that I met. Everyone was joking around on set and there was just a lot of laughs and it was just really magical. I hope I answered your question. I feel like I kind of went on a tangent.
No, you absolutely did. It's great to hear on all counts. I have been to Denver. I agree. It's an awesome town. I certainly wasn't filming a movie there, but I agree. Everyone I met there was super nice. So that's really great to hear.
Yeah.
As someone who grew up in Long Island, I can definitely understand the polarities of the people in those areas.
Yes. And don't get me wrong, there are like a lot of great people here too, but it is different.
So obviously you've done a lot of different genres. You said you've worked like you've done plays, obviously horror films. You also have a lot of other shorts under your belt. But if you could pick your absolute dream role, what would it be?
Oh man, I'd be like Katniss in the Hunger Games.
Oh, that's so awesome.
That's a great answer.
Thanks. That's like what I live for. Like I always want. I love like dystopian sort of post-apocalyptic worlds. Like I grew up watching Mad Max and Dune and all that. And so I would love to like just be the lead hero, like kick ass, like saving the world kind of thing. And I just love those films. So.
And you definitely take bow lessons beforehand too, right?
Oh yeah. Like I'll do whatever. I'm like all about doing whatever it is I can to, make sure that I'm actually good at it in real life, before I would go film. And that'd be rad. And I have kind of like practiced, my sister has a bow and arrow and she also has these like throwing axes. And so like we practice that too. So I'm like, one day this role is going to come to me and I'm going to be ready.
Your sister sounds like the kind of person that you don't want to cross.
No.
Yes, bow and arrow and throwing axes.
No,
good to know.
Yeah.
So speaking of being the hero role, before we sign off today, this is another question that we like to ask all of our interviewees. If you can have any superpower ever, what would it be so that we can classify you as our own podcast Avenger?
Oh man, I would fly. I have dreams about flying, and I just I don't know, I feel like that's such a lame like superpower, but like I just have these dreams, like reoccurring dreams that I'm flying, and it just feels so good. Like it's so freeing, and that and healing the world, I guess. Really, I know that sounds like super cliche, but I just feel like our planet really needs some real healing and love in this time, so that would be that.
I'm just I'm considering your flying is, by the way, a perfectly valid answer. I'm just trying to reconcile it with your talking about altitude sickness a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting.
That wouldn't happen though, because I would be like a flyer, and
you'd be way up there. Well, we want to thank you so much again for coming on the show. We really appreciate having you discussing all the ins and outs of Rent-A-Pal and your career at large. So Rent-A-Pal is currently available on demand, and it's a great watch for this time of year, and any time of year, but especially this time of year. Before we sign off here, are there any other projects coming up that you'd like to shout out? Any last words for our listeners that you want to impart upon them? You have the floor.
No, I actually don't have anything lined up right now. I think COVID has just been like such a weird time, especially for actors. Mm-hmm. But I know something good is coming. Like I can just feel it. Like I magnetize and I meditate, and I'm kind of like a, what's the word? Like the power of now kind of thing. Like I'm into all that kind of stuff. Like the law of attraction is what I meant to say. And so I feel like I have a good feeling that something good is coming my way. So I'm kind of just, enjoying what's happening with this film release, enjoying meeting all the wonderful people that I've had the opportunity to meet, like you guys, and just really appreciating like my day-to-day life. And I'm going to be moving to LA in January, so I'm really excited for that new chapter as well, and we'll see.
That's very exciting. Great. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. Again, Rent-A-Pal, go check it out. And now I think we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with more podcasting. Thanks again to Amy.
Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by Restaurant.com. With Restaurant.com, you can save at thousands of restaurants across the country with just a few clicks. Their dining deals range from $5 to $100, never expire, and cost you a fraction of the face value. Dinner has never been easier with Restaurant.com. Used for dine-in, takeout, or delivery.
Restaurant.com is offering our listeners 50% off their next purchase by going to www.restaurant.com/podcast. That's www.restaurant.com/podcast for 50% off your next purchase. Restaurant.com, the best deal every meal.
Which brings us back into our main episode. Thanks again to our sponsor, and now to some news. And also thanks again to Amy Rutledge, by the way. We had a pleasure talking to her. Hopefully you had a pleasure listening to it. But now, let's talk about Star Wars. So we talked about The Mandalorian last week. Obviously, that's still going on. I could talk to you all day about ice spiders today if I wanted to, but we're actually going to focus on a different component of Star Wars, the sequel trilogy. And actually not the sequel trilogy that you are aware of, the one that came out, but the one that George Lucas had originally planned. And there was something of, I don't want to call it an expose because that's not what it is. The Star Wars Archives 1999 to 2005 book hit the shelves earlier this week. And among other things, it details some of the ways that Lucas's Star Wars sequel trilogy would have happened and would have been different than the one that we saw. And of course, I think it's fairly well known at this point what my opinions of the sequel trilogy are. I think a lot of people felt that it lacked, to use a Techtic phrase, a certain je ne sais quoi. But Lucas's vision apparently involved one Darth Maul. You remember Darth Maul, the guy who got cut in half at the end of episode 1. Spoiler alert. There's a lot to process here, but I think to start, we can kind of go around the proverbial table here. Thoughts on Darth Maul as a Star Wars villain, as a potential, trilogy helming villain. He didn't get a lot of time in the prequel trilogy, so maybe he was actually due this reprise. Techtic,
so
thoughts on Darth Maul?
I love Darth Maul, and it wasn't so much the movies that got me to love him, but more so the animated various series that he was in.
Clone Wars.
The Clone Wars and Rebels. And it's because of that of why I love him. And the reason why, let me just expand on that, is because you all saw him get cut in half and go down a garbage chute, right? The only thing that just kept him going was his pure hatred for Obi-Wan Kenobi. And that's powerful stuff. And that's why I liked him. The whole thing was just driven by vengeance and anger, and that's badass. And so that gets me going. I didn't like that he was so easily killed at the end. Sorry for spoiling. But all in all, it just makes him a really fearful character. He got robotic upgrades and legs and stuff. And so even in the live action, there's serious potential to keep that alive because we've seen it in the animated. We've seen what they can do. He had spider legs at one point. He had regular legs at one point. Just crazy, awesome stuff.
Well, so when you said he dies, do you mean he dies after the Phantom Menace?
In Rebels, Obi-Wan finally finishes him off once for all, and it's almost poetic in the way that it's done, but it was just like boom boom done, and it was just.
Have you seen Solo?
Yes, I have.
Okay, well, we're gonna get into spoiler territory again. I wasn't anticipating this for whatever reason. That's kind of confusing to me that he died in Rebels. I didn't know that because he makes a.
It's way after Solo. From a timeline perspective.
Rebels is after. Oh, right, because Solo happens. Timelines in Star Wars, man. So he's at the end of Solo. He shows up, presumably acting as something of a crime lord, and that's what Lucas seemed to have envisioned him as being. Not necessarily a Sith Lord. He would have had a Sith apprentice, but it sounds like he's being described more in a criminal underworld, almost like a Jabba the Hutt kind of way, except if Jabba the Hutt, could actually move, kind of way. I've always loved Darth Maul. I totally agree with what you said. The way that he was built up in episode 1, right? I mean, especially episode 1 was the comeback of this franchise, and Darth Maul, in terms of the antagonist, he was like the driving, in all the promotional material, he was the driving force. He had the dual lightsaber, that was the thing where Star Wars was coming back, and they have two-sided lightsabers now? What? Like, it was a big deal. And then, Obi-Wan cut him in half, even though he had the high ground, and that left us where we are now, wishing we had more of him. But he also just from a physical standpoint, he looks so
scary,
menacing, and so
demonic.
The way if you were to imagine a bad guy in the Star Wars universe unprompted, I could imagine you coming up with something that looks a lot like him very easily.
And
so, yeah.
On top of that, and this is, again, going into the animated series, it was in Clone Wars, they really delve into the psychosis behind, him being trapped in this junk planet with only his thoughts, and he just goes purely insane and has, like I said, these sweet spider legs. And
Robot
if they were to, I'm going to call him spider legs, he looked like a spider. If they're going to make that part of it into a live action, I am here for that. Because just as normal people legs, he's scary. Now, throw some arachnid parts on it, and whoo-wee, terrifying.
So, it's worth noting, too, and Nerdbomber, I'm gonna give you a chance to cut in. It's not just going to be me and Techtic geeking out this whole time, but one final point I would add is that, after Darth Maul in the prequel trilogy, what did we get? We got Count Dooku, who was fine, and then we got General Grievous, who by most accounts was really not fine. I don't personally mind General Grievous, but it seems like a lot of people have issues with General Grievous. So I just, it leaves you wondering what could have been, and I imagine it probably also left George Lucas wondering what could have been, which brings us back to the story we're talking about here, which is that he was going to be the big bad of the sequel trilogy. I mean, training Darth Talon, who apparently was also his apprentice in the comics, and I know nothing about these comics, but they were going to be the main two villains. And looking at the villain structure of the sequels as well, I mean, Kylo Ren, I can understand going that way. That makes sense to me. Emperor Snoke was a big swing and a miss. And Emperor Palpatine, I'm honestly back and forth on that as a plot device. But Darth Maul, I have to think at face value would have been better, at least as a big bad.
I feel like you could have your cake and eat it too, where Kylo Ren was, I think, a really interesting choice because that's obviously Han Solo and Princess Leia then have to grapple with the fact that their son went to the dark side. But you could still have your cake and eat it too if Darth Maul was the big bad. I mean, Kylo Ren could have been his apprentice. They could have kind of twisted the comics a little bit to make Kylo Ren Darth Maul's right-hand man, you know what I mean? And explored it that way. Because I agree with you. I think Kylo Ren was compelling, but I think the back and forth, am I good, am I bad? I'm so conflicted. He was supposed to be the underpinning bad guy, but he really wasn't.
He was always struggling.
Right. And you always were kind of empathetic a little bit. He was a big old jerk, but there were times when you're like, okay, well, we know your parents. We care about your parents. Like, obviously, you're going through some stuff. And, we care about you as a character. But there was no one that really brought that, I'm just a supervillain bad guy vibe to the sequel trilogy. And I think that would have really helped a lot. Or at least tied some things together a little bit better. Because I don't think the Snoke and Palpatine thing, I was not impressed with those moves.
I wanted Kylo Ren. We could sit here and talk about what was wrong with the sequel trilogy all day. I read, there were a lot of leaked scripts to episode 9, and I know at least one of them ended with Kylo Ren dying and basically Rey killing him. It's similar to the Mustafar duel with Obi-Wan and Anakin. It's a similar situation, but it actually ends with Ben Kenobi doesn't turn good. He turns full evil and he has to be killed. And I think that would have been better. I think it would have been more interesting to watch. I think Darth Maul, there's no way he wouldn't have been an improvement over Snoke. Talking about the model that you just mentioned, which is Kylo Ren's still there as an apprentice figure, but Maul is there as the big bad. There's no way that wouldn't have been better because Snoke, I mean, he was just a colossal dud.
Yeah, kind of a weenie in my opinion.
Yeah.
Kind of a weenie, yeah.
But so to your point about Palpatine earlier, he had his purpose because his relationship with Rey. And so I get that. I'm with that. The other thing, though, that I think Darth Maul would have brought to this, you have an expansive universe, and yet we have Jedis of just humans.
Right. So also that.
Mix it up, people.
Yeah.
The universe is there.
Well, one of the other things, too, about this whole reveal, it wasn't just that Darth Maul was the original big bad, but I think Lucas also went on to say that his original plot point was that Luke was going to try to reinvigorate the Order of the Jedi. He didn't just disappear for an entire movie and become a sad hermit on a planet by himself. And ultimately, Princess Leia was going to be the chosen one at the end of his story arc. And obviously, that probably couldn't have happened just because of, obviously, we know Carrie Fisher passed away and that arc probably wouldn't have been able to be completed. But I think that's the kind of thing that we all wanted to see. And we didn't necessarily want to see, I liked the new characters. They were okay. Rey was fine. But if I wanted to sign up for Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Princess Leia, all getting back together and doing some badass stuff. And instead, that's not what we got. We got them all being kind of sad and some dying. And it was just I don't know. I feel like that original story arc and then bringing in the villain of Darth Maul, I don't understand why they didn't go that direction because it seems on paper it should have been so good. So I'm very confused. I want to know what went on behind the scenes to move them away from that story because it sounds good in my head.
And it was already proven out in the animated. I always go back to that. That was a quality show.
I'm sure this book, and now we're seeing elements of the animated and the comics and the extended universe making their way into The Mandalorian and being, well received. So I think this book probably chronicles a lot of what you're describing, Nerdbomber. I have to imagine George Lucas abdicated control either willingly or because Disney made him. This is kind of an offshoot, and I want to move on before we could sit here and bash a sequel trilogy all day and explain how it could have been better. But kind of an offshoot, but I saw something today about, J.R.R. Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings universe. When he sold the movie rights, his one condition was that Disney could never be involved, which I thought was interesting. And, I think a lot of people associate the sequel trilogy and its lack of success as a Star Wars trilogy, they attribute that to Disney being involved. And I'm not going to sit here and say that that's what it is, but there's probably an argument for that. I mean, The Mandalorian is bucking that because Disney's obviously involved in that, and that's been very, very good and very successful. But it's interesting to think about what could have been with Darth Maul or with any of George Lucas's other ideas. I'm sure he had others. And instead we got what we got. And it's a little baffling to realize that that's where we wound up. But we want to know on the social medias, Twitter, we have @OWLeague86, @OW Nerdbomber, @OW Techtic, and our main show account @OnlineWarriors1. What do you think of Darth Maul? I mean, let's just start there. Do you think he was good? Do you think he was bad? Well, he was a bad guy, but do you think he was a cool villain, I guess is more the way the question should be phrased. And do you think he could have had a good place in the sequel trilogy? And also, what did you think of the sequel trilogy? Just talk to us about Star Wars. We're here for it. So there's that. We have to move on to some, of course, sadder news now. We knew Alex Trebek was struggling with pancreatic cancer, which of all cancers is the one you don't want. I mean, you don't want any of them, but you especially don't want pancreatic cancer. For years, he was struggling with this, and he finally, last week, I believe, this past weekend, passed away. And look, I think Jeopardy is one of those things where I like game shows a lot, and I like trivia a lot. I'm the kind of guy who, Jeopardy's on Netflix. And by the way, if you don't know that, go watch some Jeopardy, if only to connect with Alex Trebek. I'll watch it on Netflix. I'll pull it up and as I'm laying in bed falling asleep or as I'm on the treadmill, things like that. And as someone who appreciates knowledge and as someone who appreciates the comforting nature of television shows like, Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, things that are always on that you might take for granted. For me, this was a huge loss. Even, by 2020 standards, this was a huge loss. It's a huge loss for a lot of people. And it felt appropriate to talk about him and his legacy in this episode. I mean, are either of you Jeopardy? Did Jeopardy on in your house ever?
We haven't watched it lately, but I know growing up, there was that power hour of Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy back to back, and we always had it on in my house. My parents would be like doing the dishes, and we'd all kind of be watching Jeopardy together. And it was just, it's a very iconic show. And I think as much as Jeopardy in itself is iconic, I think Alex Trebek really made that show what it was.
Yes.
What he hosted, was it almost 8,000 episodes of Jeopardy?
36 years?
Yeah,
I believe
over 30, I think it's 35 years. And man, it's just a sad day. Another sad loss. 2020 has been kind of racking him up. But Alex Trebek, I think, you never heard a bad thing about the guy. He always seemed like just this genuinely good person. And even his interactions with people on Jeopardy, like he always seemed like he was super relatable and down to earth and could talk to people. And just a very impressive guy. I know he has taught me a lot of things through his TV show throughout my life, and he will definitely be very, very missed.
Yeah. I mean, again, you're hearing stories now as you often do when someone passes, but the guy clearly enjoyed what he did and was a true professional. And, the show itself, yesterday was the first day they were airing a new episode since he passed, and the producer released a statement before the episode aired, basically saying they're going to continue airing his episodes through the end of this year because he's already recorded a bunch of them. I think it would be crass now to, speculate on who his replacement would be, but imagine having bigger shoes to fill than whoever that poor sap is who has to replace Alex Trebek. I mean, he was a cultural icon, and like you said, Nerdbomber, I mean, I especially watched Jeopardy more when I was younger. And there's a nostalgia associated with it for a lot of people. And, nowadays, if not watching it on Netflix, the most I see of it, I don't have cable, so the most I see of it is some funny thing that happened that he did or some touching thing that happened that goes up on social media. Or, when James Holzhauer was having his record-breaking run and everything. But he was an amazing man, and he will truly be missed. I mean, did you guys see the clip? I don't want to get too into specifics, but there's a clip around back of the time, because he announced his diagnosis, I think it was earlier this year. It's been publicly known for a while that he was going through it, and the first episode after he revealed it, the first episode that was taped after he revealed it, so there's a time delay on these sort of things, but for someone's final Jeopardy, they didn't know the answer, so they just wrote, "We love you, Alex." And he got, again, true professional, he got through it, but he got very emotional reading it. And it was just, he meant so much to a lot of people. And as a trivia lover, he meant a lot to me. So it's just, it's a hard thing. Techtic, you've been awfully quiet. I don't know if you watch Jeopardy, if you're a Jeopardy guy.
I've watched Jeopardy actually mostly at Nerdbomber's house later in life, but I mean, you guys said it all and you said it well. He will be missed. He
will be very missed. There's no sugarcoating it. There's not much more to say than that cancer sucks. So we will move on. But we just wanted to take a moment to express our sympathies, of course, to his family and his friends and everyone whose lives he touched, and we'll be thinking of him and of those people. So here's to Alex Trebek. What we're going to get to happier news and to especially perk up Nerdbomber, some other big news that came out this weekend. This was the happiest I've seen Nerdbomber on a messenger.
I don't remember. Did I all caps this when I messaged you about it?
This was an all caps situation if ever I saw one. Nerdbomber is very publicly a huge fan of the Mass Effect trilogy. And to a certain extent of Andromeda, but less so. And this past weekend, BioWare and Electronic Arts confirmed, this was on Saturday, that Mass Effect Legendary Edition will be released in spring of 2021. This bundle will include all 3 mainline Mass Effect games. So that's Mass Effect, Mass Effect 2, Mass Effect 3. This will not include Andromeda. All the single player and DLC for those games, all promo weapons, armor, and packs, and of course it's a remaster. So Nerdbomber, before you go on, because I know you're going to, I want to talk about my experience of being peer pressured ruthlessly to play this game by Nerdbomber, and I did play it on the Xbox 360. I played the original. I didn't finish it. In fact, I didn't get very far with it.
You didn't give it a fighting chance.
I didn't, and I don't remember the circumstances. I wish I could remember the circumstances. I'm sure there was something going on with me at the time that I couldn't give it my full attention or something of that nature. Even in the short time that I played it, what I can say is that it is a deep, deep game. Like, it is getting all 3 of these games, even if it's a $60 price point, which I imagine it very well could be. You're getting a lot of game for that. I think there's a very good chance that I pick up this remaster and wind up loving it and wind up getting a whole lot of game out of it. Hemming and hawing on price is one thing. We were talking before air about, if this thing costs $60, I don't know, but if it's $40, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But this is also going to have forward compatibility, so it's being released, I think, primarily on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, that generation, but it's going to be given some enhancements specifically for PS5 and the Xbox One X. So lots to look forward to here, and now, I'm going to let Nerdbomber talk for a while, and I imagine she's going to.
All right, so if you guys have not played Mass Effect yet, and again, looking at you, Illeagle, this is the game that when I was kind of coming back into video games, so I had a PlayStation 2 and I played that for a very long time, and then there were like those few years where I stepped away from gaming pretty much completely, and then I got an Xbox 360, and Mass Effect was one of the first games that I played. And it really showed me making that jump from the PlayStation 2. And granted, yes, there were games that had really good storytelling, but there was nothing quite like Mass Effect. It was one of the first games that I experienced where I was truly emotionally invested in the game, and decisions that I made for the first time mattered very deeply, whether characters that I loved and connected with lived or died. And I'm so excited for the people who haven't gotten a chance to play any of the Mass Effect games yet to jump in, because this is something that big Mass Effect fans like me have been clamoring to get for a long time, because there is no good way, besides backwards compatibility, there's no good way to play the entire Mass Effect trilogy on current gen consoles. And there are some things too, like especially in the first game, some of the combat systems were a little janky. I don't know how much of that they're going to revisit and kind of revise in a remaster like this. I hope they do a little bit, because I think that's what a lot of new players kind of get stuck on, is some of the controls and gunplay being a little janky in the first game. But I'm super excited because it's just bringing these games and these characters to the next generation of people, and especially around a new console launch, it's going to give a lot of people a chance to experience these games for the first time. And like you said, there's a lot of meat in these games. I would say the Mass Effect 2 was probably the longest game, I would think, in the trilogy. I know Mass Effect 3 was also pretty hefty. The second game was probably the one I spent the most time with. And I think I spent like 80 hours with the game, like a long time. There's a lot you can do. And so a $60 price point for these 3 amazing, masterful pieces of video game storytelling is a great value. And I would say anybody should pick it up.
And then on top of that, one of the best mechanics of the game is between Nerdbomber and I, we each had our own very, very unique playthrough. I remember we were talking about it, and I had asked her, I said, oh, you didn't have this character? And again, they died? And right. Even there, our teams were completely different. So you get to kind of have a unique experience that you make your own. And that's just an awesome feature to have in a game.
Yeah, like the dialogue with the characters is incredible. And so it's really heart-wrenching. Like Techtic said, when he said that his character died, and it was one that I like tried my hardest to keep alive, I was mad at him. I was just like, how dare you let this person die?
No, you're the one that had it die. Mine didn't.
Let me just ask this, because I remember this, and this was years ago. This had to be maybe even the Nerdbomber podcast. I don't remember. But which one of you killed the Krogan? Wasn't it the Krogan? Who
so
died?
I killed the Krogan, but Techtic
killed the Krogan.
Techtic killed
Caden is who I killed.
Yeah.
But that was someone who had to die. The Krogan did not need to die.
Caden didn't need to die.
This is what we're talking about, guys. This is what we're talking about. A lot of decision making. It's, like, I think for me, I don't remember having issues with the gunplay, but I remember it was treading into an RPG world that I had not yet really approached. And even now, like the most RPG-y I get is like basic skill trees that like The Last of Us 2 has. And Mass Effect, you're making decisions about whether you're going to be, what is it, Paragon or Renegade? Is that what the two are?
Basically good or evil.
Good or evil. And, it's one of those games, every conversation you have, tilt your needle in one direction and your character relationships are tested. But I'm a story-driven guy. That's one thing that the listeners probably already know about me. And I mean, talk about an experience that's undeniably cinematic. For me, that should play. So yeah, I do think this is probably in my future.
I think for you, the biggest thing is that you have to make sure that you don't get bogged down in the details, because while it is an RPG, it's not that heavy of an RPG. Like there's skill trees, but like it's not super in the weeds, and you're not constantly checking your inventory all the time. It's not one of those where like you're constantly going and trying to sell stuff. It's not that in depth. I think you just have to immerse yourself in the story, get involved and engaged in the characters, which is really not that hard to do because the world building, the character conversations and relationships is second to none. It's something that a lot of people have been really disappointed with when it comes to BioWare, is that their more recent games like Mass Effect Andromeda, the storytelling was just okay. Like I didn't hate it,
good,
but it just didn't live up to the original trilogy. And I think it's just a one-of-a-kind experience that I think you will really like. You just have to make sure you don't get bogged down in the details.
Yeah, I mean, Andromeda had an impossibly high bar to, even as someone who isn't as big a fan of the games as you are, I will say that like Andromeda had an impossibly high bar to try and hit. And, there's probably an argument to be made that they were never going to hit that. But I think that, I think I've said on the show many times, and I'll say it again, like more companies, EA among them, should be doing remasters. This is a no-brainer as far as value proposition goes, especially in the case of Mass Effect, where, like I said, you're getting so much game for the buck, and BioWare and EA are probably getting a lot of buck for not a lot of work. I mean, the story itself is already there. They have to touch up the shaders. They have to maybe tweak the gameplay mechanics a little bit, as you mentioned, but I think they're going to do it justice. I'm sure they put a lot of work into it, but it's the thing that should be happening. Like, please, remaster Metroid, remaster Dead Space, remaster, and I'll say too about EA, I'm mad at them right now because they are remastering Need for Speed Hot Pursuit instead of the ones that people clearly want and have wanted for ages. Need for Speed Most Wanted and Need for Speed Underground 2. People have been begging for remasters of those for decades now.
They remade Most Wanted, but it wasn't good.
It wasn't good.
The same.
All people are wanting is take those two games, which are, by the way, perfect. Like Most Wanted, the original Most Wanted,
amazing,
the best racing game I think I've ever played, and instead they're remaking Hot Pursuit, and they're not even remaking Hot Pursuit like the old one. They're remaking Hot Pursuit, the one that's basically Burnout, the one that Criterion was in on. They're remaking that one, and like No one asked for that. Like, I'm sorry, no one asked for that. People asked for Mass Effect. This makes perfect sense, but no one's asking for that Need for Speed. They're asking for different ones, and EA is not giving it to them. They're asking
what
for
I don't
Dead Space,
understand,
and EA is not giving it to them. I'm just,
like, Most Wanted, not to harp on that, but Most Wanted was like one of my favorite games on the PlayStation.
it's in my
2.
top 10.
And
for sure, it's in my top 10.
I don't like literally just make them cars of today, but keep everything else almost exactly the same. Keep the story the same. Keep most of the missions the same. Literally just make updated cars, updated graphics.
I don't need current cars. I don't need current. I would drive the same exact cars. Like, I would play the same exact story. It's just the gameplay. The cop chases in that game are
incredible.
It's the best they've ever done. And Need for Speed Underground 2 was the best. Most Wanted focused less on the street racing and more on the cop chases, and that was really awesome. Underground 2 focused on
Everything
the street races and the insane customization. Like, you could put underglow in your car. You could like your NOS exhaust could be a certain color. You could get hydraulic.
Just remember
it was the coolest.
young Illeagle jamming to from the window to the wall.
Oh my
to the
God.
wall.
The Riders on the Storm remix. I legitimately, I'm pretty sure I have. Yeah, on my Spotify, I literally have a playlist called Need for Speed. I think that has a lot of like the Underground 2 Most Wanted jams because some of them were absolute bangers. Riders on the Storm, the Snoop Dogg remix. Forget about it. That was the main menu music for Underground 2.
Do you know when my parents were buying a new car, and I don't know why they listened to me. I'm sure they probably did research after the fact, but I was playing Most Wanted, and you start, I think it was with a Chevy Cruze at the time?
Chevy Cobalt.
Or Chevy Cobalt, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Cobalt turns into a Cruze in real life later on.
Right.
And so I was driving around in my Chevy Cobalt, and my parents needed a new car because their car died. And I just walk out and I'm like, you should get a Chevy Cobalt.
You can put a sweet NOS kit in there.
And they got a Chevy Cobalt. So
yeah, Chevy Cobalt was the best starting car in that game. I think you had like 3 choices. That was the clear choice. Some of the cars in that game, and now we're really digressing, but I don't care. That game was
not as good as Mass Effect. So buy Mass Effect.
Not as good as Mass Effect, but like that game, in terms of like games I want remastered, it's like Metroid Prime Trilogy, Dead Space, Need for Speed Most Wanted. It's number 3, which I played a lot of great games in my life. God, Most Wanted was... And Need for Speed Underground 2, the drift races. Oh my God.
Did you play with a racing wheel?
No, a GameCube, right?
No. I was on GameCube for Underground.
Yes, me too. The
Yeah.
Y button to shit.
The Y button. Actually, wasn't the X button the handbrake? It doesn't matter. It was amazing.
See,
And
I had a racing wheel because I was back in the days, like now racing wheels are super expensive and souped up and like $90. But back in the day, which I'm sure with inflation, $30 felt more expensive at the time. But my parents got me like a $30 Mad Catz racing wheel for the PlayStation 2. And let me tell you, the most fun, and I'm sure that probably makes my experience with Most Wanted even more like hyped in my head. But man, that was something special. Really was.
Yeah, I had Most Wanted for the 360, so it sounds like you had it on the previous generation. I had it on the next gen at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And God, I'll never forget, like when we first got our 360, it was in our living room, which the feng shui of that room, first of all, my mom had to watch me play a lot of Need for Speed Most Wanted because that was like our main TV in the house, and I would just play Most Wanted. She'd be like sitting there doing whatever moms do when they can't watch the news and watch me play Most Wanted. But the feng shui was bad, so I would have to stand near the TV. I would stand for hours playing that. Like, I sacrificed the body. Like, that's how good that game was. Oh man, the challenges you had. The last challenge in that game was you had to have a cop chase go for a half an hour, which doesn't sound hard. Almost impossible. It's like the hardest thing I've ever done completing that challenge. Anyways, so, Mass Effect is getting remastered.
To put you on the spot a little bit on
yeah,
air.
Go ahead, please.
If you don't play Mass Effect when this remaster comes out, I feel like you got to buy me a soda pop or something because you're just going to break my heart.
Yeah, I'll buy you a soda pop. The stakes are very low. I was expecting much worse than what you just said.
Murder.
Well, because I'm hoping that the odds of you having to buy me a soda pop are very low and that you're just going to do it. I've been recommending it for like, I feel like almost a decade now.
No one recommends something like Nerdbomber. I've known you for a decade, and so that's probably an accurate figure. You've probably been recommending it. I probably met you in college the first time, and like 20 minutes into our conversation, you're probably like, if you played Mass Effect. Like, that probably happened. I don't remember.
I did the classic, like, so have you played Mass Effect?
Right, exactly. This is coming spring of 2021, so my reckoning cometh. Whether it be playing Mass Effect or buying Nerdbomber or Soda Pop remains to be seen. But yeah, get hyped for that, Mass Effectors. Long live the Krogan, etc., etc. So we're going to move now to What Are You Up To Wednesday. But before we do...
Oh, wait, hold on. Did we discuss, before we leave Mass Effect, that they're also making a new Mass Effect? Because that was another thing. We went off on a tangent, but I don't know if we mentioned that. That was the other announcement, is that they're also working on a new installment in Mass Effect. And I just want to say, I don't know if I'm excited.
It will be called a quadrilogy.
I'm skeptical. After Andromeda, which wasn't terrible, but did not knock it out of the park. Leave good things alone.
You're not ready to be hurt again.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Ye of little faith. I mean, you never know. It could be incredible. We'll see, I guess. I don't know when. I mean, that has no release date, but
I mean,
good
as
to know
Star
they're working
Wars, it is an expansive universe with much possibility. So I would not say that there's a chance that they could ruin it just yet.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I want it to be great. I'm going to buy it day one. Doesn't matter. Even if it sucks, don't care. I'm just a Mass Effect shill, so I will buy it day one. But I want it to be good. I'm just afraid of being sad.
You're afraid of it being bad, yeah. Well, time will tell. As it will tell whether I'll play the remaster or not, but we'll see. Before we move into What Are You Up To Wednesday, it's that time of the episode. Ben, you might have been worried we weren't going to shout you out, but we always going to be shouting you out, my friend. Our good friend Ben Checkness is a producer on this episode. He supports us on Patreon at the highest level. Here's to you, Ben. Patreon. Let's talk about Patreon. So, as I said, Ben supports us there. We have 3 tiers of support. The highest one, the night level, is where Sir Ben lies, and as a result, he gets access to the monthly secret segment and vlog, as well as this producer's shout-out, input into our weekly game segment, which this week is, I believe, about chicken soup for the soul, and the occasional guest spot, which that is coming up very, very soon, hint, hint, for Ben, so be on the lookout for that. There is also a Squire level of support, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment and vlog, and then the page level, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment. So for more of the details on that, you can head over to patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast. Thanks again to Ben. And yeah, we're not going to go to an ad break again. We're going to go right into What Are You Up To Wednesday? Because, my friends, it is Wednesday. Techtic, want to lead us off this week?
So the biggest, most fun thing that happened to me this past week was we put up all of our Christmas decorations. 2020 has been awful, and the sooner we can start spreading cheer and happiness, we are going to. And by gosh, by golly, we have the brightest house on the block.
Oh.
And it's only because we're the only house with Christmas lights on it. But still, the brightest.
Have you heard that song? Oh, by gosh, by golly.
Oh, you
it's
bet.
Time for mistletoe and holly.
Yeah, that's what I was going with.
I'm going to confess something here on the air because I feel this is a safe space for me with you guys and the listeners. Don't prove me wrong, but I am the kind of person who has a strict tradition. Did I talk about this last week with my Christmas music tradition? And am I retreading? I'm trying to remember if I
think we
mentioned it.
did. We talked about it a little bit. We went really holiday-ish.
Yeah, I've broken the seal very early this year. So I respect the early Christmas decoration. I've seen photographic evidence of this, my fellow online warriors, and it's a spectacle. And as Techtic mentioned, the rest of the street is dark. So that means you won, really.
They'll catch up.
Here's hoping. Well, Nerdbomber, what do you have to add, if anything?
So gaming-wise, I've been taking a little bit of a break because this is the next-gen console launch week. And I know some people got their Xboxes yesterday or today that we're recording this. And I will be hopefully getting my hands on my PlayStation tomorrow, the day after this episode goes live. So I don't want to start anything new because I want to jump into Spider-Man almost like ASAP. So I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to finish something halfway and never go back to it because I love Spider-Man and will never go back. So really what I've been doing, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but here we are. I've been watching Dawson's Creek, and let me tell you, the 90s were pretty wild. I have never watched Dawson's Creek before.
It's not good.
It's not.
I've never seen it. I watched, so Netflix is advertising this because it's been just recently added. And on Facebook, they put the first scene where, which one's Dawson? Is Katie Holmes Dawson, or is Dawson the guy?
Dawson is James Van Der Beek.
Okay, so Dawson and whatever Katie Holmes' character's name is,
Joey,
are hanging out, and Joey is like, I'm going to go home. And Dawson is like, no, stay and sleep in my bed. And she's like, no, we're too old for that. And he's like, no, come on. And it's like a whole scene for like 5 minutes. And it made me so uncomfortable. And I just imagine that's what the whole show is. So, like, please tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
So, the first season, it gets off to a pretty cringeworthy start.
He's
and
like, we're not going to fall in love. Like, it's
I don't know if the whole series is like this. And like I said, I've never watched it before. This is my first watch through. I remember, like, growing up, like, mocking the show. But now Netflix advertised it, and I want to see what it's about. Because so many people love it. So, like, there's got to be something good here.
He's the weird. I just have to say this. He's the weird kid that carries around a video camera and just records things randomly.
So, like, my thoughts so far, and I'm only, like, maybe halfway through season 1. First off, there is an extremely, extremely uncomfortable and problematic storyline. I don't remember his name in real life, but the guy who plays Charlie Conway in Mighty Ducks, he is in the show. His character is named Pacey. And there is a whole story arc about how he is banging his 36-year-old English teacher, and he is like 15 years old.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what is this? Who approved this to go on air? And like, she doesn't get arrested. She like rides off into the sunset. They try to make it seem like it's all like, oh, it's so sad they can't be together. But it's just, this is freaking creepy. What is this?
You know what I have to say to that? I don't want to wait for our lives to be over.
You don't even get that.
You don't even get that satisfaction because they lost the rights to the theme song.
No!
So they
why
replaced
even put it on?
I don't
kidding
know.
Me?
The first time because the theme song is after the cold open, right? So,
right.
You sit through 5 minutes of the show in the first episode and you're like, okay, here's the payoff, the song. And then it's just some other song. You're like, what is this? Like, is it going to cut in at some point?
What's
like,
the song?
I honestly, I have no idea. I skip intro. Once I heard it wasn't that song, I was like, skip.
Right. You better believe if that song was still on there, I'd be not hitting that skip intro button every single episode. I'd be like, here we go again. I don't want to wait for our life. I mean, that song
opportunity.
Who sang that song? Is that a one-hit wonder?
I have no idea.
I'm Googling that right now.
What was she doing? Thinking of pulling her song from the show? Because think about all the royalties she could be making right now. You know what I mean? It's having a Netflix
Maybe she
resurgence.
saw the show and was like, ew, yikes.
But yeah,
Paula Cole.
The kids too, and in all of the reviews and stuff, everyone's lauding the show because, the kids are like witty and they use snappy vocabulary and they talk fast and they don't like dumb it down for teenagers. But also, these kids don't speak like real teenagers. So, I mean, as an adult, I appreciate it because it makes it a little bit more watchable. But there's just a lot of 90s cringe going on, and it's interesting. It's very interesting. It's a weird flashback to the past. I hope it gets better. I'm halfway through the first season, and now I'm invested. So, like, I got to see it through, but wish it gets better. I'm still having a really hard time coming to grips with the fact that I Don't Want to Wait is not used in the intro. Like, why even put the show on? That's all anybody knows about it.
Yeah, but yeah, that first scene, oh man, I wouldn't be able to make it through that. Even if I sat down right now on Netflix and was like, I'm going to watch this, that first scene would scare me off. It's just very, very strange.
Yep.
Good to know you're watching it, though. Keep us updated on Dawson and his creek. Why is it his creek?
Honestly, I've been trying to figure that out. I literally think it's just because he lives on the creek. And it's confusing, too, because I looked this up after the fact, after I started watching, but he's not even in every single episode. Katie Holmes' character is the only one in every single episode. So why isn't it like Joey's Creek? I want to know.
Sexism might be the answer. Also, Dawson's Creek sounds better because Dawson is one hell of a name.
The names are interesting. You've got like Pacey, Dawson, like Joey.
Where is this in America? Like, where
I think
is
it's
Dawson's
supposed
Creek?
to be somewhere in Massachusetts.
Okay. Well, Katie Holmes, James Vanderbeek, we have available interview slots on our show. We just interviewed Amy Rutledge. You heard how well that went. We would love to chat with you about beepers. I think that would be interesting. You know, what happened to beepers? That could be a whole segment. on my end of things, I have a couple of recommendations. Sticking with Christmas music for a second, and knowing that this is breaking the rules, it's probably even more of a cardinal sin to recommend Christmas music to other people during this time of year. But Leslie Odom Jr. just came out with a new Christmas album, not the one you might already know, which is where he sings all these Christmas standards. That came out either last year or a couple of years ago. He came out with a new one this past Friday. And for those that don't know who Leslie Odom is, he's Aaron Burr from Hamilton. And when you talk about silky smooth voices, none compare. He's like he's less of like he's silky smooth like Bing Crosby, but obviously his voice is like way higher. If that's not really a very good comparison, but he's really good and I recommend checking it out. That's one recommendation. Another kind of an older cut movie that showed up on Netflix that I was like, oh, I wanted to watch this. I've wanted to watch it for a while. I'll watch it now. Snowden. Which, did you guys see Snowden?
How was that? I wanted to watch that.
It's very good. I would recommend it. You should know what you're getting into, but in case you don't, it's going to make you scared of everything. So be ready for that. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is pretty spellbinding, so if you like him, you're going to like the movie. Nicolas Cage shows up, so that for me, that was really the draw, one of the draws. So I was a big fan of it. It's very, well, you should just watch it. I don't want to get into more of the details because the story itself is very, very compelling, but I don't want to give any of it away now. I would say I recommend it for anyone who's curious to learn more about him or knows the story and wants to see it dramatized. It's pretty good stuff. So that brings us to the end of What Are You Up To Wednesday, which brings us to our weekly game show segment. And this week we are being hosted by Techtic, and he is talking to us about Chicken Soup for the Soul. Now, to clarify, Chicken Soup for the Soul, is it a series of books? I don't even know what it is.
It is a barrage of books. Before I get into it, I just want to mention two things. You might be interested in it. There's a documentary on it on Amazon Prime on the whole Snowden debacle. And the other thing is... Yes. The other thing is, I forgot to mention, don't buy Watch Dogs until a little bit because it consistently freezes and they're still working on the update for the Xbox. It should be out any day now, but you might want to continue to wait a week or so before you buy it.
This has been a PSA from your friendly neighborhood podcast host.
Yes. It makes it borderline unplayable. So, Chicken Soup for the Soul. It is a barrage of books of inspirational stories and feel-good stories that just kind of...
True stories?
Yes. It's actually not really written by a person so much as it's compiled by a person because...
It's like an anthology.
You can actually submit your very own feel-good story to be included in a Chicken Soup for the Soul book.
No, I don't have any feel-good stories.
Well, that's
Not a single one.
No, I'm plumb out.
Without further ado, let us get right into it.
I've set the stage here for how little I know about this, so the bar is extremely low on my end. But let's do it.
In the very first book that was released, how many stories was included in it?
Who goes first on this one?
I'll let you guys figure it out.
I'll go first. I feel like I have nothing to lose. 16.
I feel like it's more than that. I think it's probably somewhere in like the 30 to 40 range. I'm going to be conservative and say 30 though.
Both conservative answers, I guess. It's 101 stories.
What are they, paragraphs?
I'd imagine they're short stories. I mean, if you're submitting something to be compiled, you're not writing chapters. It's
not like, well, on the day this happened, I woke up and I made some coffee. It's like, no, let's get right into it.
The summer breeze was cool, running through my hair.
So Nerdbomber gets a point, as expected. Let's soldier on.
Okay. So with this first book, when was it published?
I feel like this became all of the rage in like the mid 90s. I'm going to say 1994.
I think you're really close. It's definitely a 90s thing. I'm going to go a little bit earlier and hope that you were a little too late. I'm just going to say 1990.
So unfortunately, Nerdbomber busted, and she was just a scooch too late. It was June 28th, 1993.
Oh, 6 months off. That hurts. I'll take the point. That's Chicken Soup for the Soul right there.
So you had originally asked,
Frothy.
how many, is it a series of books? And I said it was a barrage. With that, how many Chicken Soup for the Soul books are there?
101. The same as the number of stories in the first book. 101.
Nah, dude, I feel like there's a chicken soup for everyone's soul. I feel like there's chicken soup for the golden retriever soul, chicken soup for the
that is how it works, right? Like
soul.
chicken soup for the nurse and like chicken soup for the
I'm going to say there's probably like 300 of these books kicking around. Probably more, honestly, but 300 is where I'm going to land.
So the only solid number I can consistently come up with, and Nerdbomber could be right, but she could have also busted. And what I found was it's over 250 books.
Oh boy, that puts us in a gray area rules wise. But I feel like I get it. I feel like it's me.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
For now.
First of all, why does no one know?
I had the hardest time finding it, but I really wanted to put that in there, so I went with over 250 books.
I guess no one sat down and was like, I'm going to go on Amazon and look at every Chicken Soup for the Soul book and count them. That's kind of an undertaking. I'll take the point.
So before initially getting published, how many publishing companies actually rejected this idea?
That's a good question.
A lot of stupid ones, I feel like.
No, see, I would have rejected this.
Really?
And I'll give your answer and then I'll get more into that.
I'm going to say 4 publishing houses rejected this.
As a child, again, in the 90s, when this was becoming a hit, I remember like seeing the book or like reading the title and being like, chicken soup, what does that even mean? Like, I think there's a bit of a jump between like yeah, I get that chicken soup like makes you feel better when you're sick, but like Chicken Soup for the Soul, it's a strange title. The imagery is very strange to me. It's like if I'm reading this book, I'm gonna open it. And
everyone has a different
steam's
comfort
gonna come
food
out.
too.
Yeah, but I picture like I'm opening this book and steam's coming out and it smells like chicken soup, and I'm like, I don't want that. I want to read a book. I'm gonna say 7.
So Illeagle gets this one again. It is 30 publishing houses actually rejected it.
Really?
I did not even know that there were that many, but I'll take the point.
Okay, so once it got published, how many copies of all of these books have been sold worldwide?
Quick score update. Am I in the black here? Like, is there enough questions for Nerdbomber? Isn't it like 3-1 right now?
Yeah, but she can get it if she gets all of these. She can tie it up.
Okay. The question is, what's like the worldwide gross?
Number of copies sold.
Number of copies sold. Well, there's over 250 books. I don't know why that would help me. 200 million.
Okay, I'm going to say this was a phenomenon originally. And I'm going to say like the first 25 titles sold like, because I feel like I can envision the cover of one of these saying over 300 million copies sold. So I'm gonna do some calculator math. So the first like 25 sold 300 million. Oh, can I type that much? Yeah, I can type that much in my calculator. Oh boy, that's a lot. And so maybe 200 more just to play it safe. Maybe only sold 1 million because then too many. 70. Oh, I don't even know what this number is. It's so large.
Billion?
If you say gajillion, you busted.
Hold on.
70 billion copies.
I think I'm gonna
more copies than grains of sand are on beaches
I think I'm gonna say 70 billion. That's excessive and insane, but I'm going
crazy
for it.
Woman.
There are
the calculator doesn't lie.
Think about it. There's probably people out there who have purchased multiple Chicken Soup for the Soul
So
books.
if you ever watch Price is Right, when you're in this desperation scenario, you do the +1 rule, generally, not the +70 billion rule.
The calculator doesn't lie.
Nerdbomber busted by a lot.
Wow.
A shock.
The answer was 610 million copies.
But nobody even knows how many of these books are out there. This number isn't firm.
Okay, you need to relax.
I can't remember the last time I saw one of these books, which just that alone tells me there's not 70 billion in the world. If there were 70 billion of these books, they'd be stacked up against the walls of the room that I'm sitting in right now. Right?
There are 70 billion chicken soups out there.
I could see the math for the next question coming up. So I'm going to ask it, and then I'm going to say the math that Nerdbomber is about to do. Chicken Noodle Soup for the Soul was on New York Times bestseller list for a number of years. How many years? And now what you're going to do is you're going to take the year that it was released. You're going to take the year we are today. You're going to add how many years have been inside of 2020.
And
that's going to be your
by
number. And you're going to end up with 200,000 years.
and then multiply it by 1 billion.
I'm going to say 1 year.
Oh, it's more than that. Come on. Now you're gun shy. I'm going to say 4 years.
So Illeagle gets it right on the nose.
Screw this chicken soup.
At 4 years.
Wow. This chicken soup is tasty. I didn't know I knew this much about Chicken Soup for the Soul. Do I have chicken soup in my soul?
You had a near clean sweep too, by the way.
You're enlightened.
Yeah, I've reached a higher plane of existence thanks to chicken soup. Is that it? Are we done?
That was 6 questions. You got 5 of them right.
Yeah, I'm saying I could easily answer 10 more correctly. I don't want to do that. But
Just want to bury me.
I know a thing or two about chicken soup for the soul. That's the takeaway here. It means I'll be hosting next week. I won't be hoping for next week. I'm going to be hosting next week. So tune in for that. We're going to sign off now, but we want to thank again Amy Rutledge for joining us for the interview we had earlier in the episode. We really enjoyed that. We want to thank all of you for showing up to listen. Thanks to our Patreon supporters again for getting back to the show and helping us keep this thing running. And if you're so inclined, hit us up on Twitter or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. For Nerdbomber and Techtic, I'm Illeagle 86 signing off. We'll see you next week.